other co-host.
Dimmer.
And today we are going over the guide to maladaptive daydreaming. We're doing part 3 today with our good guest, Liz from New York. Hello, Liz.
Hey, thanks for having me again.
Oh, absolutely. Anytime.
Part 3. Yeah. Okay. So one note about part 3 is if you're following along online, part 3 is titled "Are You There?" But if you've printed it out, part 3 is titled "Return to Reality." I'm not sure why they're titled different things. It's the same part. Don't worry.
Mm-hmm.
I got so confused the other day. Somebody was talking about "Are you there?" And I was like, "Oh no! Are the parts different? Am I behind? Did my thing not print properly?" But it did. It did. They just have different headings for some reason.
You're simply deranged, as is the website. That seems to print it differently. Yeah, the sidebar is different as well, depending on the chapter that you're on. So, one thing to note before we begin is, for instance, chapter 1 was a very long read comparatively to these later chapters. And in part 3, it's not exactly as long as part 1 or part 2. They seem to be getting shorter as time goes by. I noticed that when I was going through it.
Yeah, part 3 is really only a few paragraphs. I think the next part is actually probably the longest part. I'm not sure. I didn't read ahead, but it seemed hefty.
Yeah, once I got to part 3, I felt like Eretaia had gotten most of their ideas out on paper. And I haven't quite gone through part 4 yet. But up to now, these are not as hefty of a read. So if you've gotten to this part, don't worry. You don't have to read another textbook's worth of material to get yourself through this.
Yeah. As far as where we're at right now, too, I think this part's my favorite part so far. What about you guys?
Well, it's not as aggressive as the last part.
Yeah,
At least
maybe
I
that's
don't
why.
think so.
I don't know, Liz. How do you feel about this part? Just generally.
I think it made some good points, especially about the importance of being present. I sort of got the underlying feeling that the author was trying to maybe be appreciative of your life as it is, or find things in your life to be appreciative of, as a way to, if that's what a person is doing, minimizing maladaptive daydreaming, if they're trying to do that.
Yeah, I think she was kind of going for that too, and not just being appreciative of what you have, but building your life into something that you can appreciate. You don't have to be in a spot where you even have anything you can appreciate yet, but you can always work towards making your life better. And I think she's advocating for that pretty heavily, which I agree with you. Not everybody is in a place where they can look at their reality and say and find good things. They're just not. But they can be eventually.
And I think it's also important. I mean, there are people that don't really want to not daydream, So, I mean, for me, there are parts of this that I really couldn't relate to, but, because I'm not at that point where I want to stop daydreaming or am working towards minimizing it. Right now I haven't daydreamed in a while due to medication. So it's been a weird process. It's sort of like a forced kind of cold turkey type of thing, which has been a very strange experience. So I've had to be more present. So this part came at a interesting time to read and think about.
Yeah, that's a forced cold turkey or something spurred by medication or whatever. That's hard to adapt to when you weren't expecting it. Like, a lot of people are building to that and laying their foundations for that, but if that comes at you out of nowhere, I mean, that is panic inducing.
Yes. Yes, it is. And that's why even though I like some parts of this article because they are discussing a way where you don't have to give you don't have to have one or the other. You know, like towards the end, they make the point of saying like it doesn't have to be daydreams or nothing. There can be like a mending of the two, so to speak, or at least aspects. Um, which maybe one day I can get to, but right now it's sort of is really one or the other.
They're a little bit later in a little bit farther down in part 3. There's a couple distinctions that Eretaia makes that I like quite a bit, but I think we'll get to that when we do. But as like an overall uh as an overall piece, I gotta say I enjoyed reading it in particular because she makes those distinctions. And it's not just towards the end, but my favorites tend to come at sort of the second or third to last chapter, or sorry, second to last paragraph, because there is a fine line between well, we'll get to it, but there's a fine line between certain things that she mentions and makes the distinction of in this part 3. I don't know if you guys want to start at the beginning or if you guys want to sort of jump around to what you like first.
Um, Let me see what I don't like first, because I just want
Oh,
to get
okay.
that out of the way. I don't want to beat a dead horse. What I don't like about this chapter is the same stuff I didn't like in parts 1 and parts 2. She's still on the MD is caused by depression. You are depressed thing.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be a given throughout this. That's just the perspective she's coming from. Um, and I don't want to bore everybody by droning on about it every single time we do one of these, but it's present here too. And then in this one, I really got the sense that she's still advocating for giving up daydreams completely,
Hmm.
which I don't personally think is a good way to do it. Not the best way to do it. I think most of us want balance. Most of us are seeking balance. Um, but I feel like she's definitely coming from a like, don't have these fantasies at all kind of place.
Hmm. Yeah, she does have a couple of there's a couple, not as many in part 2, but there are a couple parts that are forceful, or sorry, a couple sentences that are forceful in this part,
Yeah.
but
Even I mean, when they're peppered in like they are in this part,
it's
I
not a
don't find it
problem.
too distracting.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's not a problem. It's a
it's
lot
not a
more,
problem.
yeah, for emphasis rather than like just a really distracting tone. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
I noticed that like there is I'm going a little bit farther down, but I think anyway. I noticed that she mentions that um a person might assume that their reality is dull as a reason to why they seek their daydreams, but that's not always the case for some people. There could be many of other reasons. It doesn't necessarily have to be that the person's reality is dull, or in some ways it um eventful. It could be a bad eventful or a good eventful. So that was something I thought was an interesting take that they had.
Hmm.
Yeah, I had thoughts on that point too. Gonna draw your attention to page 2 here, or I have pages, you probably don't.
I have one very long page.
What is it? It's like it's the third
Yeah, like the third
paragraph.
yeah.
Yeah, reality can't measure up to your daydreams only because you are not here. That's the one.
Yeah. Yes, reality can be just as exciting, just as thrilling and mind-blowing and emotionally fulfilling as your daydreams. Hard disagree.
I'd soft disagree, but only because you can't get them as mind blowing, and but you can get them as emotionally fulfilling. It just requires a lot more effort, and it doesn't come as easily for sure. But that's why it's a soft disagree. Like I don't agree completely, but it's very much it's hard to get for sure. I've been working at it for a while. It's hard to get an emotionally fulfilling life for sure. It takes a long time too. I think we've mentioned this a couple times before.
Yeah, I mean, sure, I think that some people can achieve that, but they're the kind of people who have the resources, you know what I mean,
Right.
Mhm,
to travel. They're not locked down to family and things, you know.
mhm,
I'm not going to pack up my 8-year-old and join the Peace Corps and travel the world. I'm just not.
mhm,
But some people are in a position where they could do that. They could go thrill seeking if that's what they want.
mhm. You would have to have a lot of resources to go thrill seeking, and most of us can't exactly do that. I know I can't.
Yeah, I mean, you can do it. You can do it a little bit in your local area and stuff, but I'm never going to see Mount Kilimanjaro, and I need to be okay with that.
Mhm.
That would be awesome, though. It really would.
Yeah, it
That
would.
it would. It would certainly be mind blowing for sure. But yes, I like this. Where is it? It's a little bit. No, it's a little bit farther down. That I like in particular. But we can go over this paragraph first. Is there anything else you all like about this one in particular?
That was a dislike. A like I have though is don't use that as an excuse. It'll never compare to the life inside your head.
Hmm.
Like yeah, it will never compare to the life inside your head. I feel like I agree with that, but I feel like it directly contradicts the sentence that literally just came before it.
Hmm.
Your perception is flawed, not the world. I definitely agree with that.
Hmm.
In my case, I create it, so of course it's reality will never compare, because reality is it's dependent on so many different factors, like we're not 100%, in we're in control of our reality, but our choices also depend on other people's choices. You know what I mean? So we each impact each other, at least
Hmm.
Yeah.
what I think. And in the daydreams, depending on the scenarios, the person who's daydreaming is the sole creator, so to speak. So if they don't like something, they can change it, or they can replay it, or whatever the mechanism is. But like you were saying about traveling or not being able to, like, in a lot of ways, our circumstances, a lot is out of our control.
When daydreaming, there are no constraints. That's probably the shortest way I could put that. You're not constrained by time or money or family or or the laws of physics or anything like that when daydreaming.
Exactly.
So it makes it much easier.
Yeah, yeah.
I tend to like focus on like the last like first and last sentences of each of her paragraphs, but the last little bit of this paragraph that I liked a bunch is as long as your thoughts are turned inwards, you are not here. As long as you're not here, reality will continue to be terrible for you. I like the focus on mindfulness that you all pointed out before. And I wouldn't say life will continue to be terrible for you as long as you're not there. But I mean, it certainly isn't. It certainly would help to be there if you want to improve your life a little bit. I wouldn't say it continues to be terrible. I mean, it depends on your situation, I suppose.
Yeah, I feel some people can float gently over life,
Mm-hmm.
and it won't be terrible. It won't be great either, but you won't have the big downs, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and some people are content with that. If you're content with it, though, would you call it maladaptive?
Mm,
I don't know. Yeah.
but but if you are not satisfied with the world around you, not being mindful, if you think the world's terrible, not being mindful will not make it any better. I like that sort of ending bit because it does focus on the mindfulness. Returning to reality means returning to yourself. Do you agree with that? I like it a lot. I like that statement in particular.
I mean, it depends if you are comfortable with who you are too, because if you don't like who you are, returning to yourself could be a not good thing.
Destructive?
Yeah.
Or okay.
But if you can say like, I'm a decent person at the end of the day, and for me, I think I have a good, a good belief system. I try to be a good person. Obviously there are a lot of things that I would like to change, but it's not as bad coming back to myself, now that I talk it out loud, as maybe I thought it was, in some way.
I think a big part of the point she's making in this particular passage is that the person you are returning to initially is not yourself. That's the self who is coming down off of a daydream. That's the self who hasn't built anything yet, the self who's been depressed, she would say. But the self who's been trapped in these circumstances and in their own head. But once you can break away from that, you can, peel off all that bad shit.
Mm-hmm.
Find yourself, I guess. Yeah, you can. Maladaptive daydreaming covers up who you really are, especially if you're in the bad years of it.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people don't know who they really are because they've put so much of their time and attention and emotional resources into a fantasy, not into reality. If you haven't lived enough in reality to have built a real self, you're not returning to a real self. You return to a husk, and you need to build it into a self.
So like returning to the core and then focusing on inward reflection. Am I getting that correct? That's how it sounded to me, right?
Yeah.
Inward reflection, I guess, but inward reflection that's actually reflecting you, or not reflecting you, because I think our fantasies do that a bit, but that's actually centered on you and who you really want to be.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of like becoming more like introspective.
That's the word. Oh my God, Liz, you got the word that I could not think of. Holy cow!
My favorite word. That is my favorite word. That's the the clue word there.
Mm-hmm. It's a very good word. It has many syllables.
Yeah, actually, I think she actually says it not too long after that. It doesn't mean forcing yourself to focus on the outside world and pretend you are what you're not. It means rebuilding your sense of self until it's solid enough for you to exist in your own body.
Mm-hmm.
And I
wonder though, because is that, depending again on, because everyone's different, depending on the daydreams, is it possible? Maybe that's not always possible, depending on who they are in the daydream.
Mm-hmm.
No. I'm sorry, I didn't follow that thought.
Oh, but like there are parts of me, like say, like I have a physical disability, so in my daydreams I'm able-bodied, so I have to sort of come back to myself as disabled, but there's like no way forever for me to be able-bodied. You know what I'm? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So that,
So
yeah. So it's not always possible, depending on what you're striving for. If you're
Mm-hmm.
striving to make, yourself better, like inward, that could be, But if it's more of an outside thing or more of a physical thing, it's not always possible.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
definitely. And she does. I do think she's talking about the inner stuff. She says, don't force yourself to focus on the outside world and pretend. You have to rebuild your sense of self. So you could, yeah. I mean, I'm never going to be a space elf. Like, there's no way to change my body into that. But no, it's fine. But I can rebuild my own sense of self where I don't even want that. And I'm not saying it's something I want. It's just the best,
Right.
because I am able-bodied. It's just the best I can relate to that.
One thing that keeps coming up is that a lot of these, Eretaia is speaking from her own experiences, and we mentioned last time in our previous episode that these were originally posts on a forum, so she is coming from her own specific viewpoint. So it is these kinds of things in your maladaptive daydreaming journey is different on a case by case basis. So these will not always stick, as is the case that Liz mentioned. It doesn't stick. Some of these points don't quite stick for her.
Yeah.
But I can sort of see where she's coming from in particular. One thing I don't like that she says is at the very last paragraph, the first sentence she says, "There is no such thing as finding a balance between fantasies and reality, because if you do so, you will always be split, moving from one place to another and never dedicating yourself wholly to the other side." Okay, maybe we'll be split, but you can find balance. My problem comes from the fact that it seems like she's assuming that you can't sort of find a medium in between them, or that if you do find a medium, it's better to be in reality, and like being halfway between either isn't good for you, or something like that. I don't agree with that at all.
Me
That's a hard
either.
disagree for me. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of it.
Yeah, I highlighted that too. Yeah, that's a hard disagree for me as well. Because
Mhm,
I think you definitely can find balance. We know now, but she did not know then that immersive
mhm.
daydreamers exist.
Correct. And we mentioned this last episode as well, that this was written far in the past. Well, how many years ago was it now? At the time of this recording.
I I 2015, 2014, something like that.
So it'd be like 7-ish years roughly. So like being over half a decade old, old wisdom, old information. So I don't hold it against her by no means, but I that is for me a hard disagree, because I found more worth in balancing both of them. So in my experience, that is something that has worked for me, but she disagrees with here.
It
Mm.
also mentions that it's not fair towards people in your real life and fair towards yourself, which I mean, like you guys said, I don't agree with her statement there either in the beginning, because I do think you can find a balance. I definitely do. I haven't found it, but I definitely think that a balance exists. It doesn't have to be one or the other.
Yeah, I mean, I half agree with that statement that she made there that it's not fair towards other people or yourself because I have children. And if I am split, I think I can be split. I think I can find balance and live a healthy life. And that's what I'm working towards. And that's what I think I have made a lot of progress towards. And I think it's going to work out just fine. But if I continued to be split in a maladaptive way, definitely not fair. You cannot have children and split your life in an unhealthy way. You just can't. It's neglect.
hmm And I'll put it this way: the sentence immediately following it, it says you have to go for all or nothing. And my problem with that is, if you can't go for all, because believe me, like I've been trying for a very long time, and Dimmer, you said you've been trying, and I think a lot of us have been trying. But that implies is that if you haven't gone for all of it, or you're not able to make all of it, then there's no point in doing it at all. And I don't like that implication personally, because then what's the point? And I don't like that that statement of like, what's the point of doing it if I can't go all the way? Or like, even with me trying for so long, or with using all of my energy and I can't quite get there, my best is never enough. You might hear that once or twice, as someone will tell you your best is never enough, or something along those lines. It's like, well, then what's the point in the first place? And it's just it's, I think, a little unhealthy. I know it was unhealthy thinking that way for me, so I've tried to sort of shed uh that information, just try to keep that at a distance, take it with a grain of salt, because I just don't like the way and it doesn't sound healthy to me.
I completely missed that on my read through. I think that's an excellent point. And I feel like if I had read this at a younger age, where I was still in the thick of it. Because
Mhm.
when I read this, I had already decided to do something about it. But, if I hadn't been in that place, if it had been like just a year before, I might have just thrown out the whole concept with, if I thought it was all or nothing. If it comes down to all or nothing, I think most daydreamers who are, you know, in the, oh God, what's the word?
Who are struggling with it is the way I would put it.
Yeah, yeah, who are still deep in the struggle, they're just going to be like, all right, nothing then, fuck it.
It's how my brother often thinks when he tries something new, or he tries like a new hobby or something, and he quite can't quite get it right. He just says no and throws it out. And he learned later that that wasn't exactly he could do it without hitting the bullseye, but man, just seeing someone drop, or at least in particular me seeing myself drop, because I've gone up and down and off and on and off my horse a lot, and that sort of that mindset never really helped me. And just seeing it both in person, from first person and like second person, it doesn't. It just hurts. It just
Yeah.
hurts. It hurts.
Just to be inclusive here,
Uh,
um, there are some people who want and need all or nothing.
Right.
But obviously, I'm advocating for balance and stuff, but that's not the only way. If you're one of the people who need to do it, I'm not telling you it's a bad idea. It's okay.
hmm
No, I definitely agree. I mean, in my case right now, it's sort of a forced cold turkey. Maybe it's a good thing, but I am missing it. So I don't know how much I like this right now.
How long has it been?
I've been on the medication about a good 2 months now. It'll be, and I've noticed that, well, I'm definitely not daydreaming. When I try to force myself to, it doesn't stick. It's very like blurry, and so there's like an urge, like a itch, and it's just, I can't. It's like trying to start a car or something. It just doesn't work. And now, like when I talk about it, I tend to realize, like, wow, I haven't daydreamed the way I used to in a while. So it's kind of shocking, even as I say it.
I would like to mention, for those of you who are going uh, all the way, who are doing all or nothing, that I do wish you the best. It's very tough. It's a very like sort of hot coals way of doing it. If that makes sense. Like it
Yeah.
really is tough. So I do wish you all the best, for sure.
And I think people who are going to take that approach need to know that, like, failure is part of the process. Don't worry about it.
Red Halo mentions that he cut out immersive daydreaming to break the addiction at first, and then he's adding it back in over time when he could handle daydreaming it without dominating his life. Yeah, you just take it in steps. There are times where it's best to take it in steps, and sometimes you don't need to, for sure. But that is one way you could end up doing it.
Yeah, I did that with music, actually. Not all, because that was the biggest, worst trigger for me. Um, so that was the one I focused on. And yeah, just like cut it out completely. Um, but now I'm listening in the car and stuff, and once in a while I'll like turn a song on. I definitely can't go back to like listening like I used to. Maybe someday I'll be able to put my headphones on in bed again, but
Mhm.
I don't know. It's been a few years and I'm not anywhere close to that.
Mhm. Yep, it just takes longer for some, and not as long for others. But no, that's probably the only thing I really, really disagreed with, mostly from my own experiences. It's just not something that really worked for me, or I did very well with. Um, the I don't think we went over the first paragraph that I
We
thought
never
was.
do. Yeah, we jumped right into the center.
Well, I was I was thinking like, man, if we go paragraph by paragraph, I can get my thoughts together, and then of course I can't get my thoughts together anyways. But I did like the first paragraph. It's strange and terrifying to think about return when you've been gone for so long. Uh, you hear this a lot in different places. Some YouTubers will say this after not putting out a really high quality video, or someone who like an artist or a book writer who hasn't put out content or something in a long while. They want it to be the best quality, and the longer you're away from things that people are expecting, it gets harder to come back. You feel a little guilty about not being there. In particular, applying to daydreaming, if you are not really how do I put this? If you're not really grounded in reality for a long time, it feels worse to go back because you've been gone for so long, which is what she's mentioning. Um, and it seems to be a common thing for a lot of people, but uh, for maladaptive daydreaming, it can get really bad considering how long you can stay in daydreams and how actively you can maladaptively daydream.
Yeah, and the longer you've been gone, the less you have to return to. MD is a thing that isolates you. Social relationships start to fall away if you're the type of daydreamer, and many of us are, who chooses daydreaming over social interaction. Then what are you coming back to? Your friends don't invite you out anymore because you always said no. You don't really know anybody at your job or your school very well. Your
Mm.
entire social safety net can be just gone, just not exist anymore.
And it's so much easier to lose it than it is to gain it back. So much.
Yeah, it really is. That's the main area that I've really focused on in my recovery is rebuilding social networks. I just sort of live by the credo, like always accept an invitation. Yeah. I
Hmm.
mean, unless it's something dangerous or horrible, but
Hmm.
yeah, even if I don't want to, like I'm going to that barbecue, I'm going to that kid's birthday.
If they say anything along the lines of "Come with me to sleep with the fishes," don't take that. It's a trap. I don't know if I'd take that. Um, but when going to social events, it's hard, and not only is it hard, it never seems to get never seems to get any easier. At least I never thought it got any easier. It took ages.
I feel like it's starting to get easier for me, but honestly, it's taken a few years. Like the
Mhm.
first friends that I made coming back out of this was actually my sister's friends. I inherited all my friends.
Mhm.
Or a lot of them anyway. I just ran into one of my sister's old friends on Facebook, and
Mhm.
I noticed she had a kid the same age as mine. And I was like, "Oh my god, I need a play date." And through her, I met other people and stuff. But it was, and from there, like a few of them, I've become independent friends with.
Mhm.
But it's been rough. I've struggled to make a lot of, not a lot. I don't need a lot of friends, but I've struggled to make like good friends.
Mhm. Yeah, I have a habit of poaching friends off of other people because I just get along really well with certain people. So then they just sort of come to me rather than me having to come to them all the time. But it's hard. It's hard even coming to anybody in the first place.
It's
So,
hard as an adult, you know,
oh yeah.
as an adult with everything that, that's going on. I think that also adds another layer to it. When we're younger, we're in school, with people constantly. But as an adult, everybody is more spread out. So that makes it even harder when you are actively trying to meet people and make friendships.
Mhm. Yeah, at school you're like forced to be together, so you're friends because you're all there, but you're not really forced to be anywhere as an adult, and also everyone's really busy. It's hard to
Yes.
make plans when everybody's busy, and then suddenly something comes up, and it's like, oh well, I can't come this week, even though we've been planning it for 2 or 3 months. So,
Right, exactly.
I really like this first paragraph. I think it brings up a lot of good stuff. Q had just a few minutes ago read the first part, but the second part of it is it's strange because many of us ultimately don't know where we should be returning to. Is it even a return? What are we leaving behind? If the dream world feels like home somewhere at the back of your mind, then is reality where you should really be? And I think that brings up a lot of good questions that daydreamers should be asking themselves.
Mhm. Well, in particular, you said, "What are you leaving behind?" Of Two Minds mentioned that they ended up synthesizing what most people would get from social relationships with MD. For instance, right? So like when you, and I guess the way you would interpret that is when you synthesize something, you're basically taking like your, I guess in this example, you're trying to get like a pale it's like a pale imitation essentially. It's like, okay, you have the light from a lamp. It's not sunlight because you're not getting the vitamin D from it, but it's still light. So you're getting like a sort of half social interaction or partial social interaction, or it's not an image. It's the illusion of social interaction from daydreaming. You get something pretty close to it, but it's not entirely social interaction. So when you leave that behind, you think you're leaving social interaction behind, but it's just not. It's not the real thing, right? So, but it looks very. It's an illusion, but it's a convincing illusion. Does that make sense?
Right, and it feels real, and maybe for those moments it gives you what you need, so you're not inclined in reality to go searching for it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna share a cringy childhood experience.
Oh boy, here we go. Everybody sit down for story time. If you have some popcorn, make sure to heat it up.
So I've been in the maladaptive daydreaming community a long time. And still to this day, sometimes people will mention experiences that they had. And I'm like, holy crap, it's not just me. Even now, even after years of talking to hundreds and hundreds of maladaptive daydreamers, I'm still surprised by how much we have in common. So I don't
Mhm.
know, maybe out there somebody else has this in common with me and whoever that person was. I can't remember now. All right, so as a child, children are prone to magical thinking. That's just how their minds work. Maladaptive daydreaming starts in childhood. So, me and this person were talking, and they were like, when I was a kid, I thought that I was something else. I can't remember exactly how they put it, but that's the gist of it. Something else, some kind of alien trapped on Earth, something from like another dimension who got stuck here. And when I was a kid, that's how I conceptualized my daydreaming too, because it didn't feel like daydreaming. I never would have called it daydreaming when I was a kid. It felt like replaying memories almost. Like that's how I thought of it. Like I am remembering a life I used to have. And if I can get to the end of the memory, I'll remember how to get back. And even
Mhm.
then, even as a child, if you pressed me, I knew that that wasn't true, that that wasn't real. But in just the waking day-to-day life, that's really how I thought of it, how I thought of myself as like someone who didn't belong here. So if any listeners felt the same, add a comment on YouTube, let me know.
Mhm.
So yeah, that part I think maybe that's why maybe that's the trigger for me, is just feeling like I don't belong here.
Have you found your way back to Krypton yet?
Not yet.
Hey,
It just gets more convoluted as I go, actually.
well, one day make sure you give me front row seats to that spaceship of yours because man, I'd love to go. Holy cow.
So
Mm. But no, my I didn't have that same experience in particular, but like it's very it sounds super am I strange for thinking that it sounds really plausible, right? Am I just like prone
That
to the
I'm an
fantastic?
interdimensional being.
No, well, I don't know. It's just like that concept. Maybe it's just been done to death in media, but it's like that just sounds like something that I don't know how else to describe it, but it like seems plausible, right? Because it's like being daydreaming as differently as we do, right? It just seems very strange. I don't know. Maybe if I felt super isolated when I was that age as well. But if things were a little different, I probably would be the same.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, well, I kind of hope a lot of people so that I don't have to feel so weird and cringe about it, um, go through the same experience, but I think it might manifest differently. Like in me and that person, it was feeling like we didn't actually belong here, like we were living supposed to be living another life. We were somebody else. was stuck here in this body for whatever reason, aliens or dimensions or whatever.
Or
Um,
mutants.
but other people, I think of it like I've seen like people talk about multiverse, the theory. I don't know if that's what it's called or if I'm like mixing that up with the MCU. But the idea that like everything, the universe is so infinite that everything that can happen does happen on like a parallel timeline. So somewhere out there, your characters, as you imagine them, do actually exist.
I do think about that a lot, and I was convinced of that when I was a kid, so that I can sympathize with.
Almost like a
Like a
parallel
parallel
life,
life.
Halo says. Yeah.
That's a title drop. But no, it's that kind of stuff. Being prone to the fantastic as a kid or having such a wild imagination. It's very common when you're young, but the older you get, it's just like everyone else seems to fade away in them, but not in us. And we talked about this a little bit before, but um, it really it is isolating for sure.
Yeah, so yeah, I guess daydreamers really have to contend with that question, like, should I even be here? But I think it doesn't matter if you should be, you are,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to deal with it. My son has this book, a children's book called The Existential Giraffe. And
Mm-hmm.
it's about this giraffe going through an existential crisis, but it's for children. And he's like, what if I'm actually a butterfly who thinks he's a giraffe? How would I know? And in the end, he decides, well, it doesn't matter. This is the life I have. It's the one I'm living. So it doesn't really matter if I'm a butterfly. I'm going to live as a giraffe.
Mm-hmm. Seems like a cute little book. Yeah, my until we have what do you call it? Until we have deep dive VR where you can make yourself look like anything, you do only have one body, unfortunately. We got to build Dyson spheres, people. But, but yeah, until then, I d- me personally, I try to live life as best I can, but it is incredibly difficult being split between two different places. Even though like finding a balance, it's not impossible to find a balance. It is still very, very difficult for sure. So.
Oh, Two Minds said that the multiverse was a conceptualization they had for a while, or that reality is what comes before or after, and they settled on reality being a prequel. So
Mm.
does that mean, because I've seen this too in the community, people saying that um, they hope that, or their idea of heaven is their MD world, that that's where they're going to go after this life is finished.
Well, what do you call it? In what is it called? Japanese. Oh my God, Japanese. They're called anime. In anime, they have this concept of sending yourself to another world, and a lot of them, I think. So like that seems very similar to that, which I'm totally fine with, man. I would love to go see other worlds and stuff like that. That sounds, in most cases, pretty awesome. More like a continuation of human history. Okay, maybe that sounds a little more plausible, but I still like the idea either way. I mean, reality is what you make of it for sure.
Yeah, maybe it's easier for me because I view the world atheistically, so I don't have to deal with any concept of the afterlife. There is none
Hmm.
for me.
Oh, there is. It's your daydreams. That's the afterlife. That's what we've come to. But yeah, no. In terms of conceptualizing your daydreams and how would I put this, making them work with reality? No, that's not it. Working with them, working with reality, the reality that you have, working with the daydreams that you have, finding that sort of happy medium. I had a bunch of words I was going to say, but then I just trailed off and said nothing. It's been a rough night. Yeah. We are recording this at night again, for those in the audience. So if I had to describe this part in one word, it's for me, it's uh, how you would consolidate your daydreams with your reality. But the way that Eretaia describes it is more finding a reality that works best with you compared to your daydreams, if that makes sense. Right? Trying to push yourself towards like solely reality rather than finding yourself entirely in your daydreams. But since I don't agree entirely with that, since it is good to be in reality, but I think you can find a happy medium, um, I'd put it slightly differently than the way it's presented.
I understand where you're coming from.
Hmm. Yeah, there were a lot of words in there. I'm sorry.
If I were to sum up this section, I would sum it up in her own words. When you say reality is terrible, are you actually there? No. Do you feel like you genuinely exist in it? No. And I think especially when you're starting out in figuring out what you want to do about maladaptive daydreaming, that's what taints your perception of what you have to live for, basically.
Right.
Hmm.
Like, because you're still in that headspace where you are comparing it to an impossible standard, and you can't imagine, which is ironic since we're so good at imagining, but you can't imagine a real life that compares. And I honestly don't think they should be compared. They're not even close to the same thing.
They shouldn't be, but they often are.
They often are. Yes, I do it too. I compare them as well. But when you're really thinking about it, I don't think it's never going to be like a fantasy. You're not going to
Mhm.
feel those same, deep soulmate love. That's not what love really is. You're not going to, you know, be that amazing hero that like never falters and is always widely admired. You're just not. And you don't need to be.
And it makes you more human for it, for sure. Not being infallible. Fallibility is what makes a good human. Makes a good human. And
Yeah,
what makes a believable human and what makes a more well-rounded human. You learn from your mistakes, and not being perfect allows you to make more mistakes, which a lot of people don't want, don't like, and often kind of burns you a little bit. But in the long run, you become a stronger person through your mistakes and learning from them. So,
yeah, exactly. You're not human in your daydreams, and neither is any other character in your daydreams.
mhm.
And that doesn't mean that humans suck or that they're dull and bland and you don't have anything of worth here.
There's plenty for you in reality for sure. It's just gonna take a lot of effort, and it doesn't take a lot of effort to daydream. Or at least in your daydream, if there's a lot of effort being done, you don't have to show it or see it, but you do have to see and go through it in reality, so it hurts a lot more for sure. Yes, I agree with Of Two Minds, who's said that MD definitely encourages idealism and splitting, all or nothing. Um, but it's not idealism and realism are very, very different things. We can strive for an ideal, and oftentimes do for good reason. But realism is it's harsh, it hurts, but it can often be more fulfilling.
Yeah, I think this part is going to lose a lot of people. A lot of people that are in like people who are in like dire straits right now.
Mhm.
Young people who are still under the thumb of the people who are causing all the problems that make them maladaptive daydreamers. Still stuck with abusers or whatever. And people
Perfectionist
like
there.
Liz who are physically disabled, and you can write all these wonderful letters, but she's never going to run through a field of daisies carefree and pain free.
Exactly. Wish I could do, or at least jump on a bed. Um, but I mean, too. I mean, I do try to tell myself to at least try to use some of the, how can I put this, um, personality traits, or even if it's any little thing from my daydreams into my reality, at least try. It might not work, but at least I've tried. You know what I mean? I think
Mhm.
uh says a lot, and that's why when we were talking about like all or nothing, I think just trying to make the best life you can, that's really all we could do. But it's never gonna measure up to the daydream, because the daydreams are perfection. So, and nothing can measure up to perfection. So, but just trying, I think, says something.
Feel free to strive for better, but don't feel so bad if it doesn't hit perfection. But no, yeah, I think is that all that we have to say for part 3? It was very short.
It's very short. Yeah, I think that pretty much covers all of it. All
There
that I
might be
wanted
one or
to say.
two things that we're missing, but I can't exactly. I think it goes over most of the major points that I was hoping to sort of go over. In particular, I wanted to mention some of the stuff at the end and go over the first paragraph because it really is a good start to it. It's a fairly good start. And for something so short, it has a lot to say, I think. It has a lot to say, and even if you don't agree, there's good parts. There's several good points to it.
Yeah, this is a short part, but I think it's packed with important stuff. Obviously, I don't agree with a lot of the stuff, but
But it's very potent.
yeah, definitely, I really liked this piece.
I think part of it for me, now that we've talked it out, more, and I'm able to kind of sit here and think as I'm listening to the two of you. It's I think ultimately, like I was saying, like at the end of the day, it's just trying to, realize that life is like imperfect, like you guys were saying, and maybe that's like the beauty of it. And if we can somehow see that, um,
Mhm.
oh, I don't want to sound like a greeting card or anything, but I think that's ultimately what, like there can be beauty and craziness in the reality as well, not just the daydreams. Maybe it's just in a different way, you know. One day I hope I realize that as I say that out loud.
Yeah. Yeah, I think in reality it needs to be appreciated on its own terms, not on a fantasy's terms.
Yep, they're different metrics for sure.
Before we jump out though, I wanted to do a little shilling.
Ah, I see.
Not for me. Not for me
Oh,
this time.
okay. I see.
All right. So a few episodes ago, was it me and you or was it me and Levi? We did an episode on the Daydreamers documentary, short documentary film.
It might have been with Levi.
All right. So it was season 1, episode 18, an episode I did with Levi called The Daydreamers Film, which I'll put the link to that episode down below. So the documentary maker who made that short film has gotten funding for a long form film.
Mm-hmm.
And right now he is looking for participants. He wants to interview people. He's just gathering background information right now, so like you don't need to be scared that you're going to be on film or anything. It's nothing like that. he's going to be gathering background information for like the next 6 months. So he wants to talk to anybody in the world.
So as of today, the day as of the day of recording, which should be August 9th, 2022, you have 6 months to talk to this person. This gentleman, was it?
Yes, Thomas Willem Renckens.
And we will be linking that in the description of our YouTube, correct?
Yep, I'll link it all in the description. His website and his email and his call for participation. I'll link to you guys, send like your name, your age, and a description of what you're experiencing. He especially wants to talk to Europeans because he's based in Amsterdam. Because this is just for background, but when he actually starts casting the film, he's going to need people closer.
Okay, so what information did they need? Or does this gentleman need?
Name, age, location, and a brief description of your experience.
Yeah, your species, your star system, all that sort of stuff. So for those of you out there who have this kind of information and would like to help this gentleman out, feel free to click the link in this description, and we will send you over to him.
Yeah, he's legit. I'll personally vouch for him. He's totally cool. Liz, you've actually talked to him too. He's actually writing a book about maladaptive daydreaming. And he interview you for that?
He did. We spoke think like 3 different times. And yeah, it was a very cool experience. It was really outside of the groups, one of the first time I ever really talked about MD. So it was a little weird for me, but he's a very, very nice guy, and I'm looking forward to how the projects come out.
That's going to do it for this episode of Parallel Lives. You can join us on the Discord.
We will also be on YouTube, Spotify, and
Apple, Google, Pocket Cast, Anchor, all those. You can find them all linked up through Anchor.
thank you for coming on, Liz.
Nope. Thanks again for having me. It was a great discussion.
Oh, absolutely. Well, we always like to have you here. And for the rest of you and the audience out there, you all have a nice day, a good night, good evening, and y'all stay safe, all right?